Hey curious minds, have you ever wondered which countries might not survive as we know them? Not every nation is built to last forever. From internal chaos to economic freefall, some countries are teetering on the edge of collapse, and it might happen in our lifetime. Stick around until the end, because the final country on our list may surprise you. It's a nuclear-armed nation that could unravel faster than anyone expects. Let's dive into 14 countries facing a very uncertain future. Number 1. Lebanon. Lebanon was once considered the Switzerland of the Middle East. Today, it's grappling with one of the worst economic crises of the 21st century. The Lebanese pound has lost over 90% of its value, banks have frozen savings, and basic services like electricity and healthcare are failing. Add in deep sectarian divisions and a paralyzed political system, and you have a state that's collapsing in real time. 2. Venezuela. The collapse that already started. Once the richest country in South America, Venezuela is now a textbook example of state failure. Hyperinflation, authoritarianism, and mass immigration have hollowed out the economy and broken social systems. Over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country, and those left behind struggle with food and medicine shortages. The government still stands, but in many ways, Venezuela has already collapsed. It's just that the final pieces haven't fallen yet. 3. Yemen, a country torn by endless war. Yemen's ongoing civil war has devastated the country's infrastructure and created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Multiple factions backed by foreign powers are fighting for control, while ordinary Yemenis endure famine, disease, and displacement. Basic governance has broken down in many regions, replaced by militias or chaos. If peace doesn't come soon, Yemen risks becoming a permanent failed state. 4. Haiti. Stuck in a vicious cycle of instability. Haiti has long struggled with poverty, corruption, and weak institutions, but recent years have brought near-total breakdown. After the assassination of its president in 2021, the country has descended into gang warfare, with parts of the capital under criminal control. There's no functioning government to speak of, and international aid efforts are constantly undermined by violence. Unless something changes drastically, Haiti may cease to function as a sovereign state in the traditional sense. 5. Somalia. Decades without a real central government. Somalia has been a symbol of state collapse since the early 1990s. Though there have been attempts at forming a central government, real control is still fragmented between warlords, extremists, and breakaway regions. The terror group Al-Shabaab continues to launch deadly attacks, and much of the population lives without access to consistent law or infrastructure. Somalia exists, but barely, and its long-term survival as a unified nation remains uncertain. 6. Sudan. A country split and bleeding. Sudan is currently locked in a brutal conflict between rival military factions, turning its cities into war zones. Millions have been displaced, and the economy, already weak after decades of sanctions and mismanagement, is in freefall. The secession of South Sudan in 2011 was just the beginning of Sudan's fragmentation. If the current civil war continues, the country could disintegrate into multiple regions controlled by different armed groups. 7. Myanmar, a coup in slow-motion collapse. Myanmar's military coup in 2021 triggered a violent backlash and civil unrest that's still raging today. Armed resistance groups have gained traction, and large parts of the country are now outside the junta's control. The economy has shrunk, foreign investors have fled, and the country is veering toward total instability. If the regime loses its grip or opposition groups splinter further, Myanmar could fracture beyond repair. 8. Democratic Republic of Congo, rich in resources, poor in peace. The DRC is one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth, yet decades of conflict have kept it in a near-constant state of crisis. Armed groups roam the eastern regions, often fueled by the very minerals the world depends on. Corruption and weak institutions have left the government powerless to control much of its own territory. If instability spreads westward, the DRC could implode under the weight of its own internal divisions. 9. Bosnia and Herzegovina, a fragile peace under threat. Bosnia has been at peace since the Dayton Agreement in the 1990s, but ethnic tensions remain just below the surface. The Republika Srpska, the Serb-majority region, has repeatedly threatened to secede, raising fears of another Balkan breakup. Political gridlock and nationalist rhetoric are worsening, while the economy stagnates. The wrong spark could reignite old conflicts and tear Bosnia apart once again. Number 10. Belarus, a dictatorship on borrowed time. Belarus is tightly controlled by Alexander Lukashenko, but the regime's days may be numbered. Following the disputed 2020 election and mass protests, the country has grown increasingly isolated and dependent on Russia. If Russia's influence wanes or domestic unrest returns, the entire state apparatus could crumble. A sudden power vacuum in Belarus would leave the country vulnerable to chaos or foreign domination. 11. North Korea. Stability or a sudden collapse. North Korea looks tightly controlled, but it's built on a foundation of fear and isolation. The regime depends heavily on propaganda, surveillance, and absolute loyalty to the Kim dynasty. Economically, the country is on life support, crippled by sanctions, border closures, and a lack of modern infrastructure. Any internal uprising or unexpected death of Kim Jong-un could throw the system into chaos. Millions of citizens live in poverty, with widespread hunger and no freedom to challenge authority. If collapse ever comes, it won't just affect North Korea. It could destabilize the entire region, overwhelm South Korea, and create a nightmare scenario for China and the US alike. Number 12. Taiwan, the island under a constant threat. Taiwan is a thriving democracy, with one of the most advanced tech sectors in the world, but it lives under the constant shadow of China. Beijing insists that Taiwan is a breakaway province and has vowed to reunify it, by force if necessary. That means, even though Taiwan is peaceful internally, its very existence hangs on an international powder keg. The US has pledged to defend Taiwan, but open war would be catastrophic. Not just militarily, but economically, given Taiwan's role in the global semiconductor industry. Meanwhile, the psychological pressure of living under this threat is mounting, especially as China ramps up military drills near the island. If war breaks out, Taiwan's society, economy, and sovereignty could be destroyed in days, marking the sudden collapse of one of Asia's most admired nations. 13. Libya, fragmented since Gaddafi. Libya hasn't had a unified government since the fall of dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. What followed was a violent power vacuum, as rival militias and political factions fought for control of oil fields and cities. Today, two competing governments claim legitimacy, one in the east, one in the west, backed by foreign powers like Russia, Turkey, and Egypt. The central authority barely exists, and large swaths of the country are governed by warlords or extremist groups. Despite international attempts to broker peace, ceasefires routinely collapse, and elections have been repeatedly postponed. Without a breakthrough, Libya risks becoming a permanently fractured state, rich in resources, but poor in governance and unity. Number 14. Pakistan, a nuclear power under tremendous strain. Pakistan is a nuclear-armed country with a growing population and a fragile economy. The political system is highly unstable. Frequent leadership changes, military interference, and corruption have eroded public trust. Terrorist attacks continue to plague parts of the country, and religious extremism remains a threat to national unity. The economy is in freefall, with high inflation, massive debt, and frequent IMF bailouts just to keep the lights on. Tensions with neighboring India, internal ethnic divisions, and separatist movements further strain national cohesion. If the state were to collapse or fall into civil conflict, the consequences for South Asia and the world would be catastrophic, especially with nuclear weapons in play. So, what does it mean when a country collapses? It doesn't always happen in one dramatic moment. Often it's a slow erosion of institutions, trust, and unity. Some of the countries on this list may recover, while others could cease to exist in their current form. Stay informed, because the next global crisis might begin in one of these places. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Until next time, stay curious and stay sharp.